All right, so you're at a party. Maybe 23 people are there. Would you bet that 2 of them share a birthday?
Most people would say no way.
And that's exactly what makes the birthday paradox so fascinating. It just feels so improbable. But the reality is it's more common than we think. And we're going to unpack all of that today. We've got some research lined up, even some seriously in-depth math stuff, PhD level. But don't worry, we're going to keep things fun.
I think that's where the real fun lies. It's just so counterintuitive.
Right. It feels like pure luck, but there's actually some solid logic at play here. So by the end of this deep dive, you'll not only understand the math behind it, you'll also see how this paradox applies to way more than just birthday parties. And who knows, you might even learn something that'll give you an edge in a bar bet or two.
It really exposes those blind spots that we all have when it comes to probability.
Exactly. So let's start with the basics. Why is this even called a paradox? Well, our sources highlight that our brains tend to think linearly, meaning the more people you add. Sure, the odds of a shared birthday go up, but what we don't intuitively grasp is how fast those odds actually increase.
We tend to picture birthdays spread out over the entire year.
Yeah. As if each day is pretty unique. It's like you're searching for a matching pair of socks in this giant messy drawer. But the kicker is, with just 23 people, the odds of a match jump to over 50%. And that's where intuition totally fails us.
And it's not just some quirky math fact either. This points to a fundamental principle of probability.
Okay, so I know we said no equations, but let's try to at least unpack the math a little bit. One of our sources puts it this way. Imagine you have a box, and it's filled with 365 different colored crayons. Each person picking a crayon represents their birthday.
So even though there are 365 crayons, as you have more people picking crayons, the chances of someone picking a duplicate color, they increase pretty rapidly. And by the time you get to 23 people, it's statistically more likely than not that 2 of them will end up with the same color.
Same birthday.
Exactly.
So it's less about the actual number of days in a year and more about the potential combinations you can create.
Absolutely.
Okay, so one source had this really cool analogy that helped me wrap my head around this whole thing. They said to think of it like everyone in the room shaking hands with each other. Each handshake represents a potential birthday match. So as the group gets bigger, the number of handshakes explodes. And with it, the chance of a match.
Yeah, it's kind of like a chain reaction or a cascade effect.
Now here's where it gets really interesting. One of our sources even connects this whole birthday paradox to the world of cryptography, which is basically the science of secure communications. Okay, so now you're going to have to help me out here because I'm having trouble picturing how birthdays and secret codes could possibly be related.
Well, cryptography relies on these things called hash functions. Basically, they take some data, it could be anything, like your password, for example, and then they generate a unique output, like a digital fingerprint.
So you're saying they turn any information into a unique code.
Yeah, exactly. But here's where the birthday paradox comes in. It shows that finding 2 different inputs that create the same hash output, which we call a collision, is much easier than you might think, even when there's a huge number of possible outputs.
So even with all those possible digital fingerprints, collisions can happen way sooner than we'd expect.
Yep. And that can be a big problem for security. Imagine someone found a collision for a digital signature or even a password. They could potentially forge access or even steal sensitive information.
So this isn't just a fun brain teaser then. It reveals a real vulnerability in our digital systems.
Absolutely. And this is exactly why understanding probability and these counterintuitive aspects like the birthday paradox is so important. We can't just rely on our gut feeling when the math tells a different story.
So let's take this a step further. If even the experts can get fooled by their intuition about probability, what does that mean for the rest of us? I mean, most of us aren't out there cracking codes or designing security systems.
That's a great point. But this gap between our gut feeling and the actual reality, it can affect us in all sorts of ways, from how we manage our finances to how we assess risk in everyday situations.
Right, it's like we assume that rare events won't actually happen to us.
Yeah.
Just because they seem unlikely.
Exactly. And it's not about being right or wrong. It's about being informed when you're making decisions. Because if we don't understand how easily our intuition can mislead us, we might be making choices based on faulty logic.
So the birthday paradox is a lot more than just a party trick. It's a warning sign about how easily our brains can trip us up when it comes to probability.
And I think it highlights the importance of questioning our assumptions and really looking deeper, especially when we're dealing with things like chance and random events.
Which makes you wonder, what other hidden truths we might be missing, especially when we're thinking about more complex systems.
Mm.
Because if our intuition fails us with something as seemingly simple as birthdays, what else are we overlooking? Now that's something to think about. But for now, let's move beyond just birthdays and see where else this paradox pops up. You ready to keep diving in?
It's actually pretty amazing, this whole birthday paradox thing. It's not limited to just birthdays.
Okay, so where else does this probability puzzle come into play?
Well, the same principle applies to any situation where you're looking for matches within a set of possibilities. One of our sources mentioned same birth month or same zodiac sign scenarios.
So instead of focusing on the exact birthday, we're just looking for a shared month or even star sign.
Exactly. And the threshold for a likely match, it drops significantly. I mean, think about it. There's only 12 months. So the chances of two people sharing a birth month, they're way higher.
Yeah, our sources say that with just 7 people, there's already a greater than 50% chance of a shared birth month, which is even crazier than the birthday thing itself.
It really highlights that the paradox, it's not about birthdays specifically. It's about how those probabilities increase. Add more elements to a set, even a relatively small one, and matches become more likely. Way faster than we'd ever expect.
This is honestly making me rethink how I view coincidences in general. Maybe they're not as coincidental as we think.
That's a great point. It raises this interesting question. If we get fooled by something as simple as birthdays or birth months, what other hidden truths could we be missing? Especially when we're dealing with more complex systems.
That's a good question. Like, what about things like weather forecasting
Mm.
or the financial markets? I mean, those systems are incredibly complex. There are tons of variables at play. Could our understanding of them also be flawed in the same way?
It's definitely a possibility. Our sources don't really delve into those specific areas, but I think the birthday paradox serves as a warning. It tells us to be cautious about relying too much on our intuition, especially when we're making decisions that involve chance and uncertainty.
So are you saying we should ditch intuition altogether? Or just focus on crunching the numbers instead?
Not necessarily. I mean, intuition can definitely be valuable, but it's important to acknowledge its limitations. It's all about finding that balance between your gut feeling and a more data-driven approach.
So it's about being aware of our intuition
Yeah,
and knowing where it might lead us astray.
exactly. And that's where tools like probability theory
Mm.
and statistical analysis come in. They can help us quantify uncertainty and allow us to make more informed decisions based on a deeper understanding of the odds.
So basically the birthday paradox is like a gateway drug
Yeah.
to a more sophisticated way of seeing the world.
I like that analogy. It opens our minds up to the fascinating and sometimes counterintuitive world of probability. It encourages us to think more critically
Hmm.
about the assumptions we make.
And it also serves as a reminder that even in a world that can often feel chaotic and unpredictable, there are these underlying patterns and principles that can help us make sense of things.
Well said. The birthday paradox really is a testament to the power of math. It reveals hidden truths, challenges assumptions, and ultimately deepens our understanding of the world around us.